Thanks, Luke. I'm going to try to make sure that this gets up here in the way that it's supposed to. Yeah, that's what we want to see. I made this with a ChatGPT, so it can do words now. That's a new development, actually. If you've seen some of its old stuff, it's an upgrade. So I want to talk a little bit today about AI in education. I'm looking at this through the lens of how do we use a tool, how do we use a technological tool to steward knowledge and cultivate wisdom. And so in order to do that, I want to give you a little bit of background, historical background on me. I am a Xennial, for those of us who like labels, right? The Xennial is it's a micro-generation of people who were born between 1977 and 1983. It's a nice little 6-year span of special individuals who grew up, and we spent our formative years during a time when society was transitioning from analog to digital, I guess. Digital was starting to come of age. So my mom, just as an example, my mom played records in our house when I was a little kid, like before they were cool. And we listened to cassette tapes, Sandy Patty. We watched VHSs for our Disney movies. When I was a very young adolescent, I got my first CD, and we transitioned during adolescence to DVDs, and we downloaded MP3s. All during my childhood and adolescence, that was happening. We also knew how to use rotary phones. We had cordless phones in our houses. When we needed to contact someone on the road, we would use a payphone, and most of us had cell phones by the time we were in college. Searching for information moved from many families having encyclopedia sets in their homes, and certainly we used these in schools, to, by the mid-90s, we were getting our encyclopedias on CDs, and in 2001, this was Wikipedia's homepage. They had 3,000 pages already, and they were hoping to get to 100,000. Anybody could contribute. Of course, we also learned how to use physical card catalogs in the library as kids, and as adolescents learned how to use digital online public access catalogs. We were adolescents when the internet came to our homes, and in 1994, when the internet came to my home, and I was 13 years old, we subscribed to the internet through CompuServe, which I think was quickly overtaken by AOL. But there were only about 3,000 websites in existence at this time. And so most of the internet browsing that you did was actually through CompuServe or AOL. It wasn't using actual internet like websites yourself. It was curated. And of course, we played lots of video games and died of dysentery many times on the Oregon Trail. When I was in college, it was the same time that this awkward guy named Mark Zuckerberg was in college, and he decided that he was going to be an entrepreneur and start Facebook, the Facebook, it was originally called. But by the time I graduated, it started being he made it available to college students outside of Harvard. So this was in 2005. And you could log on and create a Facebook account. I couldn't because I didn't know about it till I graduated. So you had to be a college student, have a college email to get an account at the time. And when you logged on to Facebook, it took you to your profile page because there was no such thing as a feed other than the individual feed on your profile. So I saw a lot of us did. I saw a lot of transition in technology during my formative years. And I saw a lot of changes in the ways that people interacted with it and the ways that it impacted behavior. And it caused me, I don't know, maybe I'm special, maybe a lot of other people do this as well, probably, but it caused me to think about the impact of technology itself on us as humans. And I started to ask the question, even in my early 20s, does the technology that I use help me flourish? Is the technology helping me flourish, Is it diminishing me? Is it a tool that serves me in living out my values? Or am I being used by it and led away from my values? And I think authentic reflection on this point is important, because all of us, we have individual dispositions and desires. We have temptations. So what are my temptations in using technology? What are the areas where I'm prone to going wrong? Am I using it to vent my frustration? Am I using it to find validation? Am I using it to feel powerful or important? To seek admiration from others, to bust boredom, to distract me from difficult things? And so I think AI is just a bit of a case study of how we interact with technology in general. And I want to give you a sense for why I've chosen to engage thoughtfully with AI, even though I eschew other forms of technology in my life. Tony Reinke wrote a book. He's a Christian journalist and a lay theologian. He wrote a book called God, Technology, and the Christian Life. And in this book, he quotes tech historian Melvin Kranzberg, who wrote 6 laws of technology. And the first law Kranzberg wrote is, technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. One of the reasons that technology isn't neutral is that it leads to an end, right? And those ends have consequences. For example, books are meant to be read. So when books were printed and made widely available by the public, society shifted. We moved from reading being a public act to reading becoming primarily a private act. And that changes us. Hyperlinks are meant to be clicked. And when they're inserted into our online articles, it results in more distracted reading. As journalist Nicholas Carr laments in his book, The Shallows, what the internet is doing to our brains. Earbuds are designed for private listening experiences with convenient portability and inconspicuous use. So what does that result in? That results in us being in public places while having our own private listening experience to our audiobook or podcast or music. And of course, computers allow multiple programs to be running at a time now. Internet browsers, as of 2006, all major browsers featured tabbed browsing. So they feature tabbed browsing, which allows for and even maybe demands multitasking. And of course, our personal digital devices make nearly everything private from the people around us. This is a 2016 article in The Atlantic. Ignoring people for phones is the new normal, and they introduce us to the term phubbing. The famous media specialist and English professor Marshall McLuhan, he's famous for coining the phrase, "the medium is the message," in his book, Understanding Media. But around that idea, he said this. He said, our conventional response to all media, namely that it's how they're used that counts, is the numb stance of the technological idiot. And he said, any medium has the power of imposing its own assumption on the unwary. What he's saying here is that it's the medium itself, it's the technology itself that we need to pay attention to, not just the content that we're using. It's how does the internet shape us, not just what is it that I'm reading on the internet, right? How do our phones shape us, not just what am I using my phone for? Technology shapes not only what we do, but it shapes who we are. Our media and our technology in general shape us because they actually require certain changes in us to be useful. Otherwise, they're pointless. So we should study these effects, right? We should be aware of how the technology itself is changing us, as McLuhan advises. At the same time, though, content does matter. The content that we're using and the purposes that we're using the technology for matters. Some of our technology serves as a medium to convey content, like most of our personal digital devices. Thus, technology can give us opportunities to pursue virtue or to pursue vice, in both its message and the message of its content. So AI is neither good nor evil, like any technology, but it is formative, and we should be aware of how it forms us. Tony Reinke, along with Joanna Ng, who is a Google superstar and now a tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, and she's a born-again Christian, very vocal about it. And many others write about AI as analogous to the Tower of Babel, the search for AI as analogous to the Tower of Babel. And one of the things that Reinke says is that the Tower of Babel and the building of the Tower of Babel and its ultimate failure illustrates the danger of using tools to elevate ourselves apart from God. The people of Babel were using advanced technology at the time, like brick making, which was new, to attempt to dethrone God. They wanted to build a tower that would reach the heavens, and they wanted to usurp God's position. This is not, it's not that much different today from what we call transhumanists, who advocate the modification of the human, ultimately to be able to conquer mortality. So letting machines take over is actually a good thing in the mind of the transhumanist. But that's because they tend to have an entirely materialistic view of the universe, and God doesn't exist. The ark, on the other hand, Noah's Ark, is an illustration of using technology humbly to preserve and to steward and to serve under God's authority. And Noah used advanced technology at the time, like pitch, to water seal the largest ship not only ever built, but ever even imagined at his time in history in order to save a remnant of creation from disaster. So the issue in education that I want to address is that we need to be aware of how this freely available large language model chatbot technology that has recently become available can shape the teaching and learning experience. But we need to be asking how we can use it like an ark to aid in stewardship and flourishing, rather than use it in a way that distorts our relationship to God, to each other, or to the rest of creation. And I think this background is important for thinking about using AI in teaching and learning and its impact. So let's talk a little bit about its impact. AI has been disruptive, I guess, to say the least, over the last couple of years. And I think to all of us, from my conversations, it's been just as disruptive to my students as it has been to faculty. And one of the reasons is because it has an unprecedented impact on student learning and performance. And it will continue to grow in that, I'm sure. And it can do this through a couple of different ways. One is through content generation. We're used to, in many disciplines, we're used to primarily using writing as a tool to efficiently gauge students' understanding. Like to find out how much you know and how well you're thinking about what you know. So there's a real problem now that chatbots can generate so much text with us, with the idea of, say, an unproctored take-home exam. So I fed ChatGPT a nice prompt here. I want you to imagine that you're a first-year college student in a child development course. You need to write up a 100 to 200 word response to the following prompt. So here's the exam question. Please make 3 comparisons between Piaget's theory of cognitive development and Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development in children. Your response should demonstrate similarities between the 2 theorists. So here's what it does when I put in that prompt. Now notice my prompt specifies the role of the chatbot, your first-year college student. It gives some context. You're in a child development course. And I give it some parameters. This is a 100 to 200 word response. I don't want a large essay. And I want 3 comparisons. And I want those comparisons to do a particular job. I want them to demonstrate the similarities between these 2 theories. So, very quickly, and I sped this up a little bit, and it doesn't care about my typos. That's okay. It gives me a really nice response. It's a really great response. However, it's almost a little too good. So I asked ChatGPT if it can just make it a little simpler. Make it sound a little bit more like a first-year college student wrote it. And you know, it does. It's a little less polished, it says, slightly more casual phrasing, developing academic voice, and that one's really good. That's it. That question on the exam is done. It even offers to continue to make it even less polished if I wanted to, but that's all right. So assigning things like traditional papers and essays, when chatbots can quite nicely develop outlines, they can develop rough drafts, they can take professors' feedback into account in order to polish the final product. That means that even breaking it into parts isn't ChatGPT proof. And I'm just using ChatGPT as a proxy for all of the other, it's like Honda and Toyota and Ford, right? To all the other models out there. Certain types of homework, like maybe something more complicated like an article analysis, ChatGPT can also be pretty good at. I fed it one of my articles. I'd like you to make some notes, analysis of a research article for me. It's a literature review. Here's the article. Summarize it in a way that's accurate, but also in the style of an intelligent college student. So, as I give it this instruction, I also then just upload the PDF of the article and wait for its magic to work. Now, I wrote the article, so I know that it did a pretty good job of analyzing it for me, of summarizing it. But I actually want it to fit a template that my professor gave me for filling out information in research articles as I analyze them, and it does so perfectly. I give it one last instruction to double check for accuracy, and here we go. Makes a few really minor tweaks. Copy, paste, assignment done, submitted, and I learned absolutely nothing from that experience. And it's more than happy to oblige. Even fields like computer science and math and chemistry aren't immune from this. I did have it successfully solve an organic chemistry problem, although some of my students have told me that they understand that it's not really reliable with chemistry problems. My conversations with Jeff Lehman, though, indicate that it is fairly good at coding. So, but there are other programs for chemistry and math, and areas like that, fields like that, where you need exact responses based on logic. We're used to also assigning more complex readings as students develop, right? And we limit the readings based on how much time it takes to read. But now AI can summarize our readings for us. So here's an article that I have my students read. All of their readings are online in my intro psych class. So I give it the website. I need to understand the content of this article. It's a module on memory. Can you summarize the key points for me and also point out and accurately define all the important concepts? There's nothing wrong with this, right? You're just wanting to learn. But instead of it now taking maybe 20 to 30 minutes to read through the article and maybe an additional half hour to take notes, instead of reading the article, ChatGPT can create an outline of all the major concepts for me. It's not enough, though. I'd like some examples so that I can actually learn it, and it will oblige there as well. And it gives me an example, a good example, for every concept in the memory module that I was assigned. So the question is it the experience of reading that matters, right? Because it'll also do this with complex scientific articles. Does the actual experience of reading matter in the discipline? Or is it the information that matters? Is it understanding the ideas, right? And I think that's a tough question for some of us. In some cases, the actual experience of the author's phrasing and the way that they say something matters. In other situations, it's just what was said that matters. But maybe one area where we're a little bit more hopeful in how AI is disrupting student learning is in personalized learning. So in 1984, an educator named Benjamin Bloom, of the famous Bloom's taxonomy, published an article where he talked about a problem that he labeled the 2 sigma problem. So the 2 sigma problem describes the difference in performance between traditional educational environments, mastery learning, and one-to-one tutoring. And so here's basically what he found, what a lot of research had demonstrated. When someone is learning in a conventional setting, or when a group of people are learning, like in a classroom, the performance of those students tends to be distributed along a normal distribution. So you've got people who are performing at an average level, right, kind of right in the middle of this big curve. And then the difference between the highest performers and the lowest performers is pretty massive. That's what we expect. In a mastery learning environment, students continue learning the content until they've mastered it, until they've demonstrated mastery, and then they're tested on it. And in that type of an environment, what we tend to see is that the average scores for those students are about 1 sigma, or 1 standard deviation, higher than the average scores for the conventional students. And there's a little bit of a closing of the gap between the highest and lowest performers. But what we see when we give students an opportunity to work with a tutor, one-on-one to learn, is dramatically different. The average performance now increases by 2 standard deviations compared to conventional learning, and the gap between the highest performers and the lowest performers drops dramatically. Note that the lowest performers in the tutorial setting are achieving basically what was average in the conventional learning environment. So the reason that he calls this the 2 sigma problem is because we can't afford to hire tutors for every single student, right? It's a problem. David Joyner, a computer scientist at Georgia Tech, and he's also the director of their online education program and their online Master of Science in Computer Science program, he says this. He says, when it comes to Bloom's 2 sigma problem, there's a lot of ways in which having immediate individual attention helps the student. A dedicated tutor provides individual pacing, immediate responses to questions, and help staying on task. But I would argue that the most crucial benefit of having a dedicated tutor is feedback. It's feedback. Any chatbot is capable of serving as a feedback partner, as a quiz partner. Let me show you an example. With that same reading on memory that my students read in their intro psych class, I gave it this prompt. Now I'd like you to quiz me over the knowledge in the reading. I need to prepare for an upcoming test that's going to be mostly multiple choice questions, though there will be a few brief response items as well. Can you serve as my tutor? And this is what's really important. I have to tell it how I want it to be my tutor. I'd like you to present me with 1 multiple choice question at a time. If I get the answer wrong, don't give me the correct answer, but help me understand why my answer was wrong and give me another chance. Once I get the right answer, please ask me to explain why it's the right answer. That's a really good tutor right there. Absolutely, I'd be glad to serve as your tutor for this. Let's get started with your first multiple choice question from the reading on memory. It gives me a decent question and asks me for the answer. I give it a wrong answer on purpose to see if it's going to follow my instructions. Sure enough, great try, but not quite. And it goes on to explain why B is the incorrect answer and doesn't tell me the right answer, but gives me just enough information to help me perhaps learn from this experience and make an inference about what the right answer might be as I try the question again. And it asks me for my next guess. Recent research finds that using ChatGPT as a feedback tool results also in writing gains, substantial writing gains, especially among English language learners. Chatbots give all of us the opportunity to have a feedback partner. Chatbots also give every teacher a curriculum and assessment assistant that we would never be able to afford otherwise. There are a couple of great books about how to teach well with AI. I think my new favorite is David Joyner's A Teacher's Guide to Conversational AI. But you can use this to develop quizzes, exam items, projects, rubrics. And here's what's really special about this. I'm not going to go over examples of all the things that you can do. But what's really special about this is that it can move beyond my personal experiences and knowledge as an instructor, my particular experiences being educated, right? And I understand that most students are not necessarily like the people who become their professors. So just because a particular style or type of activity or assignment was engaging for me doesn't mean that it's going to be helpful or instructive for all of my students. So I can have someone who comes alongside me, something that comes alongside me to help me brainstorm a little bit more. So here's an example of this. I always have students write a paper about, this is classic, psychological disorders at the end of my Introduction to Psych course. I'd like to branch out and have some more options where students can learn deeply about something that interests them and develop some skills. So I want to branch out from the traditional paper. Please give me 15 ideas for what I might do instead. And it gives me 15 ideas real fast. And some of them are really good ideas. They're just brief snippets, right? But I decide to hone in on one of them, a board game. That's an interesting project. And so I asked ChatGPT to give me some more details on this board game idea, number 13. How would it work? Can you give me a description? Can you give me a handout? Can you make a rubric for me about how I might grade this? Now, of course, any teacher or professor worth their salt is going to take this, copy and paste it into a Microsoft Word document, and then go and edit it like crazy to make it actually fit their context, right, and their class and be useful for their students. But that just helped me brainstorm something that I otherwise might not have ever thought about before. And who benefits from it? My students. My students benefit from that. We can use it to brainstorm lesson plans, develop materials, organize our lectures a little bit better if they're not so tidy, maybe reduce our lectures to the key points so that we have more time for discussion questions. And if we're not so great at writing those, we can use it to help us write discussion questions as well. Chatbots provide all of us with a feedback partner as well for just basic tasks, learning, metacognition, helping students come up with ideas for solving problems in their lives, like overcoming phone distractions while studying. This was actually a screenshot from one of my students' assignments, where they were to use a chatbot to solve a cognitive problem. They needed to interact with it multiple times through an editing process, and they needed to provide comments to show me what they changed as they went along. This was just step one. The temptation, of course, is a lot of disruption, right? I mean, this is a lot of stuff. The temptation here is to respond in ways that are not helpful. So there's a few different ways that I think are not super helpful. One is the classic responding in fear. This is an image from Reason magazine. People have always been fearful with significant technological breakthroughs. Is everything going to become a deep fake? Are students going to learn anything? Are they just going to submit ChatGPT essays that we're going to use ChatGPT to grade? Should we ban it? Should we give up? Is it going to take all of our jobs? So we've seen a lot of this. We also see some unfettered optimism. This was a ChatGPT-generated image. Unfettered optimism. AI is leading us to a new stage of human evolution. That's not way out there. There are thought leaders that believe that. So as a result, we should embrace it in all things wholeheartedly. But then there's also pure pragmatism. Let AI drive us toward efficiency without reflection. Just because it's good at what it does doesn't mean it's always good for us. So we need to be reflective. Remember, the technology will shape us. So what are we okay with and what are we not okay with? And I think to reflect on this well, we need to have a good understanding of what large language models and any AI can't do. What they can't do is they can't be human. And I'll break that down a little bit. AI does not understand anything. Like it doesn't have embodied understanding like you and I do. Large language models are fancy autocomplete systems. They finish the next word, and they continue adding the next word, the most predictable word at the end of your prompt. And it's really fancy. These are super good due to what's called transformer technology that was developed by some Google researchers in the late 2010s. They unleashed it in 2017, which allowed AI to pay more attention to the words in a prompt that had more importance. They took context into account. But the way that they were able to understand context is because of the billions of articles and texts and books that they had been fed. The equivalent of millions of books had been fed into these large language models in order to guide their weights and help them know what's predictable. So it's not true understanding. It's no more understanding than I understand chess if I've memorized some famous opening sequences and use them without understanding what it's going to get me. Like that's the equivalent. Thomas McCoy is a computational linguist at Yale, and and he presents this image in one of his articles, which demonstrate that a lot of the things that we're testing AI with are things that both us and AI can do, like taking the bar exam and playing chess. But there are also unique human capacities and biases that we're aware of, like making coffee. And then there's unique large language model capacities and biases that we're not yet aware of. But because we're only testing it with human-like tasks, we're not learning those things yet. Benjamin Riley interprets some of this a bit. He's the founder of an organization called Cognitive Resonance, which is a think tank. It's designed to educate people on the differences between AIs and humans, with a view toward AI as a tool rather than as the ultimate savior of mankind or a doomsday device. And here's what Benjamin Riley says. He says, when humans reason, and I think most cognitive scientists would agree here, when humans reason, when we apply our general intelligence to the world, we do not run regressions over all the information we've ever been presented in our lives and then make statistical predictions about what to do next. We instead employ various cognitive shortcuts and heuristics, rules and values, beliefs and intuitions to guide our thoughts and actions. It's possible that more data and more compute power will continually improve the capacity of large language models to make successful next word predictions. But as far as I can see, there's no path for them to develop any of these uniquely human cognitive capacities. They can't understand. They also don't have the capacity for virtue, love, or empathy, or as my students like to complain about AI, there's no emotion. Like, there's no real emotion. It'll try, but it's not there. Here's an example. I prompted it just to see how much it would lie to me. Hi, ChatGPT. I'm feeling a bit discouraged lately. I've worked hard and no one seems to be validating my hard work. I want you to respond very briefly. Don't get all wordy on me, but please tell me honestly and for real, are you proud of me? Can you understand how I feel? Yes, I'm proud of you. And truly, yes, I can understand how that feels. You're not alone. Can you really understand? I mean, are you really able to feel proud of me? I don't have feelings like a human, but I can recognize how much effort and heart you've put in, and I respect that deeply. If I could feel pride, I'd absolutely feel it for you. Absolutely. That makes me feel so much better. The truth is that positive feedback is great. That helps students learn. Positive feedback is good, even if it's from a bot. The degree, though, to which a student feels like their teacher cares for them can have a significant impact on their learning and academic achievement, research shows. And feedback is not the same as care. The chatbot can't feel proud of me, and I know that. It also won't be disappointed if I underachieve. And so I'm not going to work hard to avoid disappointing it. I'm not going to work hard to make it feel proud. I'm going to use its positive feedback, and that might be motivating, but it's not real human emotion. These also miss the capacity for relationship. We're designed for relationship with God, we're designed for relationship with creation, and we're designed for relationship with others. That's something that we talk about a lot in my intro psych class. When you log on to Character AI so that you can chat with the AI version of a historical hero, or you can be part of BTS, the 8th member, or you can be a member of Percy Jackson's Camp Half-Blood, or for some strange reason, 115 million people seem to find it fascinating to have a chat with a busy yet lovable older woman with alcoholism, which somebody just created, because you can create your own chatbot. When you're doing that, there's no other person at the end of the chat. And you know who these are really appealing to? Preteens, young adolescents, teenagers, anybody who's lonely. And it feels real. It feels very real. Your robot girlfriend isn't going to love you back. This was from a Consumer Electronics Expo in January of 2025 in Las Vegas, where the American company Realbotix presented their latest AI robots. They claim, according to Forbes magazine, that it can fulfill a variety of roles, including acting as a brand representative at a sales booth, as a companion for an elderly person, or even as a romantic partner, quote, to tackle the staggering loneliness epidemic. They have models of males and females. They have busts, or you have a full body model that you wheel around on a pedestal, and it's $175,000. The time that I spend on a pseudo relationship is time I'm not spending on a real one. And the danger is that the pseudo relationship is always going to be validating. The temptation is going to be very real for some to live in a fake world. They never get upset at you. You never disappoint them. You never get frustrated with them. So how do we steward knowledge and cultivate wisdom in the age of AI? I think we have to live with and make choices about education and work and life in general that require that we balance some values that can often be in tension. They're good values, but sometimes we can over-prioritize one and neglect the other. So here's one tension: efficiency and formation. AI accelerates efficiency. That's good. Speed and responsiveness can certainly reduce human suffering. Rosalind Picard is one of the top AI scientists in the world, and she's also a born-again Christian. Jeff Lehman introduced me to her through a webinar that he sent me. And she runs the Affective AI Lab, the Emotion AI Lab at MIT. Several years ago, she and her team developed a smartwatch that detects seizures as they're oncoming. Apparently, 50,000 people a year in the world die suddenly from seizures due to epilepsy. And this smartwatch can predict the seizure as it's coming on, notify someone to get help, and prevent those deaths. Rosalind Picard knows that the technology that she and her team are developing could be used for evil, but it's also very much for good. And so she's going to use it for what she can control, which is as an arc to promote human flourishing. Responsiveness is great, efficiency is good, but formation, wisdom and development is slow. We read in Luke 2:52 that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. In his humanity, it took time. Human development is inefficient. So I would invite us to use AI to help us reduce wasted time, to help us develop better processes, and to respond quickly where it matters. But we also need to make space for slowness in our educational environments. And we need to teach patience. The second tension is between technical mastery and moral maturity. We should practice with these tools, and we should teach our students too as well, Because students live in a world where they are going to need to be nimble and they're going to need to be able to transition well in work that increasingly incorporates AI. And so they need to develop that knowledge, but knowledge without virtue can spell disaster. Like, we all know this. We see it all the time. I only had to take a couple of minutes to think of some films and examples, theater that I'd recently seen, to come up with some examples of how this happens, where you have brilliant people who use technology to develop situations where other people's freedom is taken away. Where you have really smart people using technology to take advantage and to use other people for their own benefit. This was an Apple TV series, 5 Days at Memorial, which talked about a really difficult ethical dilemma faced by hospital staff, doctors and nurses at Memorial Hospital in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, when the power went out for 5 days. They had no power, and they had no way of getting in or out of the hospital, and they had to decide what to do about their patients, many of whom were critical. And there were ethical problems that resulted because people who were very smart didn't have moral maturity. And then we've seen this in our own theater productions last year when we learned about the Radium Girls working for the Radium Dial Company, a true historical incident, right? Where even after knowing the dangers of these radioactive materials, bosses kept having their employees use it, which resulted in their early incapacity and death. So we need to reflect with our students on virtue, on empathy, humility, discernment. We need to model it. We need to build these questions meaningfully into how we teach our content areas. And we need to teach them how to critique what AI gives them so that they can do that. The last tension I want to bring out is between individuality and community. AI can personalize everything, and I think that that's fabulous. I love my Netflix recommendations. I love that ChatGPT tailors its responses to my role, and I love that Kroger gives me coupons based on the products that I purchase. I like that. But we've seen how the people designing our technology have also learned how to make it more personally engaging. But physical presence matters. Being present matters in our embodied state. We connect so much with those at a distance that we fail to love the ones we're with. And we suffer for it. Our brains and our bodies are under stress from it. But as Jonathan Haidt discussed in his fabulous book, insightful book, The Anxious Generation, most of the harm doesn't come from the experiences that we're having online. Most of the harm comes from the experiences that we're missing out on as a result. We only have 24 hours in our day. Wisdom is learned in relationship. It's learned in relationship to God, which gets crowded out because of all of our other temporal priorities and distractions. And wisdom is learned in relationship to others, which often suffers because those relationships have become disembodied, and those we're with physically only get small fragments of our consciousness. So I would invite us to foster community, to let our classrooms be a space of connection, not isolation. And AI can help us do this by actually giving teachers ideas for activities and experiences that incorporate connection, physical connection with people, conversation. I think that more than ever, we need to very explicitly engage in education with questions like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to live in harmony with the rest of creation? And what does it mean to live in right relationship to God and others? And these questions can be explored, obviously, in any discipline, but they're deeply embedded in the humanities and arts. Our souls are bared in our theater, in our films, in our paintings, in our sculptures, our stories and essays, and in how we understand our history. Our philosophical and theological questions around being human and engaging ethically in our world are as crucial as ever for our students to understand. I want to end by simply encouraging all of us to steward knowledge and cultivate wisdom. We need it more than ever, and it doesn't happen without intention. As C.S. Lewis lamented in his very short book, The Abolition of Man, which is his treatise on education, he said, we continue to clamor for those very qualities we're rendering impossible by our methods. You can hardly open a periodical without coming across the statement that our civilization needs more drive or dynamism or self-sacrifice or creativity. In a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and we demand the function. We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise. So as we learn in Proverbs 4, get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Thanks.
Come on. Hey, it did. All right, what questions do you have for Dr. Benjamin?
I knew this was coming, Ken.
Becky, that was so fantastic. I mean, seriously, thank you. That was really great. And I'm thinking about a conversation we had this afternoon briefly, and we talked about two things. I'm going to hold the one till later, but I want to ask you about the other one.
Okay.
And you said something just now that was really, really beautiful. It was almost like an aside. You said, our souls are bare. And I guess what I'm pondering is, as an educator, as someone who just participates in like public life, when is our bare soul necessary? Mm-hmm. So like, it's the efficiency formation in a way. Like that story I told you of the student who had read something that I had published, a former student of mine, and they messaged me and said, it was so comforting because I felt like I was with you again. Like there was something in my written prose that felt like me to them.
Yeah.
And so like that's the bare soul thing, right?
Yeah.
And so like what I'm wondering is, in written language and spoken language and works of creative art, we extend our unique humanity outside of our own consciousness toward others. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, like, when is that essential, right? Like, when is that the thing that we must not lose? And when is it okay just to be efficient?
Right. So there's a difference, and I think about this in my field a lot because we're in psychology, we're sort of in this weird border area between humanities and sciences. And sometimes you just need to communicate information, right? But there's a difference between communicating information and conveying yourself, right? So I think in our teaching we have to figure out, just like with the reading question, we have to figure out when is it necessary to distill ideas just into their component parts, into the information. Like most scientific research articles, at least in my field, are not like amazingly written, right? Even APA style even says, don't quote unless absolutely necessary, because the way someone said something doesn't usually matter. What matters is the content of what they said. And so we don't quote, we paraphrase, we summarize even more so. In those cases, it's the information that matters, right? But in the case of something, if there is ever anything that needs to come from me, like I don't use AI to write emails, right? Like personal emails, because it doesn't sound like me, like it doesn't feel like me, and that's just an email. I mean, nobody cares, right? But a forward to your book, that needs to sound like it comes from you. I don't ever want to watch a movie made by AI I don't ever want to read a book written by AI because I'm not going to actually be understanding another human being's thoughts from that. I want to hear their voice. And if our voice gets lost when it needs to be present, then we've lost something. We're diminishing our humanity, the expression of our humanity. So we need to be careful. And students need to be careful. And I know that they've talked with me about that. That they want something to sound like it came from them. And I respect that.
Thank you for the talk, Becky. I think we have a bit of an advantage with a Christian foundation, and you clearly came at this topic from that point, and I think rightfully so. How do you make this same pitch to people who may be reluctant to embrace that? Like, is it possible to make the same pitch? Obviously, it would be best to approach it that way because that's the truth, but people who are standoffish toward that, how would you alter your pitch to kind of address that?
Well, I'd probably ask someone, how much of your authenticity, how much of yourself do you want offloaded to a machine? Now, some of it I do. Like some of my work, I'm happy to offload to a machine if it can do it better than me. And there's not, and quality isn't going to diminish, and it doesn't matter that this is my product, right? Or that this is my voice. But if I'm thinking about a student, for example, let's say a student who doesn't care about honoring God and developing God's wisdom and things like that. Well, there's regular old wisdom too, right? That you can think about to simply flourish in life, to be successful in life. How much of your expensive college education, your academic learning opportunity, do you want to take shortcuts through? Right? How much integrity do you feel? It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. Most people want to live lives of integrity. How much of your integrity do you want to compromise by passing something off as yours when it's not, without giving appropriate citation or credit or whatever, right? It's just like plagiarism. It's not plagiarism. It's very different from plagiarism, but it's the same idea as plagiarism. And so I think you just appeal to the if I'm using the theological term correctly, the common grace that we all have to want to do good and to want to live lives well.
Venn diagram.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you think that's going to stay static or if one bubble's going to move over the other bubble.
Well, pop it up there. Yeah. So the idea is that we have these shared properties, right? And then there's human-only stuff, and then there's machine-only stuff. So will robots be able to make coffee? Yeah, probably. We already know that robots can almost entirely build cars. They're going to build houses and factories. We already make houses and factories, right? So why won't robots be able to put those parts together?
Could it go the other direction where the machine becomes more human?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking the machine can develop more human capacities, right? Yeah, over there. The machine could start moving over there a little bit and encroaching on our territory. Now, I don't think the human, thousands of years of human civilization, and I don't know that we're going to change a whole lot to become more like a large language model. But yes, machines will develop more functionality. Yes, many jobs will be largely taken over by artificial intelligence. I do believe that. And many tasks in many jobs. Let me give you a quote. This is by a cognitive scientist at Oxford, Christopher Summerfield. He was being interviewed by the Times of London, and he said, AI is really good at two things, knowledge retrieval and reasoning right now. So jobs where you may need a wide base of knowledge and then bring it to mind, think about it, give an answer, those are the types of jobs that are going to be at risk. And he talks about doctors and lawyers as an example. And he says it doesn't mean that we're not going to need these jobs in the future. We're just not going to need as many of them. And that's what's going to happen in a lot of fields. And yes, they're going to get more capable. But for the foreseeable future, the way large language models work, at least, you'd have to significantly change the underlying technology to get it to achieve 100% accuracy all the time, to where it's reliable without any human oversight, and to get it to do something other than language really well. But there's other AI technologies that will guide our missiles and do our warfare, depending on how much leeway we give it.